This is a special edition of Late Night Health. I'm Mark Alyn. We're going to spend some time with Gabriel Cousens. He's a medical doctor, and he's into the nothing. That's the name of it. And
Good.
we're going to find out what into the nothing means. Dr. Cousens is not only a doctor, he's a holistic doctor, a practitioner of, I counted at least 6 different spiritual and physical things that he does. He's a rabbi, an ordained rabbi. Dr. Cousens, welcome to Late Night Health.
Mark, I'm happy to be on and to share the whole, what I call holistic way to liberation. I've been involved in really holistic health since I graduated medical school in 1967.
Wow.
Well, actually, I graduated in 69, but I got into it in 68. They didn't have the word. I just saw things holistically, and I healed 5 cases that were quote, incurable. And as a third-year medical student, I solved it because they were psychological and spiritual issues. And really, these are people who have been in 5 hospitals in New York before they got to Columbia Presbyterian, where I went to medical school. It's like, what's this third-year medical student doing? And then that got me into psychiatry and family therapy, but I was seeing the whole person. And that's, we didn't have the word holistic health at that time.
Do you think, doctor, that most practitioners, medical practitioners, I'm going to a new medical doctor this afternoon, and do you think that most docs today think of the body as a whole, like the mind, body, spirit?
I kind of discovered as I'm a third-year medical student, no, but I think an increasing amount are. So I want to say it in 2 ways. Generally, people are thinking about it mechanically, and that somehow the body isn't related to the emotions, isn't related to the thoughts, it isn't related to spiritual. Now, psychosomatic medicine, we're talking more, at least there's an emotional component, at least some people are considering. But mechanistically is still what's being taught. And there's some acknowledgement that there could be other things, but it's really not that important, so to speak. So I discovered this really on my own. That's all I can tell you. It wasn't like the word was even there, holistic medicine.
Well, you've spent, the book Into the Nothing, it's a spiritual autobiography about yourself and about
Right.
your journey, your personal journey.
Right.
I want to kind of relate it to the everyday person.
Yeah, and I think the key, okay, the really key understanding is, I said everything I ever learned from life was meditating, sacred relationship, and playing football. So why did I put that in? Because it's an everyday thing. So it's how we look at it. So there's a term, thirsty, thirsty. The world is as you see it. The world is as you believe it to be. So in my book, Into Nothing, one of the principles is look at all life experiences as a spiritual lesson so you can grow spiritually. And that's an angle of seeing it, right? So that's a very, very important teaching. I have teaching throughout the book, but it's a primary teaching. All of life is a spiritual teaching. And that takes us into a much broader holistic, because you can have spiritual teachers don't look about the body. For me, in 1975, when I received Awakening of the Spiritual Energy from my spiritual teacher in India, a voice rang out and said, you should learn to eat and live in a way that supports this energy. And that's actually how I got into spiritual nutrition. And then from there, which is how to eat in a way to become what I call a superconductor of the divine. Okay.
Mhm.
And then from there, I moved on to really seeing it. Wait, there's more than just eating. Obviously, you can't eat your way to God. I'll put it that way. Okay.
Right.
And so I began to work on the psycho-spiritual part. And at that time, I was meditating 6 hours a day
Oh my.
and chanting 4.5 hours. And also as the holistic physician for a few thousand people in India. It's like, I was busy.
Yeah.
So it's like that.
There was a time that I guess you woke up and
Right.
and said, "Gee, I have to go back to my roots," or you were directed to go back to your Jewish roots with Torah and Kabbalah, etc.
Yeah. So what happened is I was in this cycle for 7 years. I was acknowledged as liberated by my two yogic liberated spiritual teachers. And then I went back to US with my family. I had two children, have two children. And then I did a 40-day fast. And at the end of the fast, on the 40th day, a little voice rang out and said, you should go return to your roots. I wasn't able to find these messages in my tradition of birth. I began to explore it, and I did clearly see that they were there. And I wrote the book, Torah as a Guide to Enlightenment, pointing out like the higher teachings of how this works, not just the everyday ethics and morals. And so that's kind of how I moved into the more spiritual. Now, as you see, I'm kind of a wild mystic, and we have many interfaith paths, but clearly we have the yogic path, but we also have the Torah, Kabbalistic path, and also the Native American. And they weave together, and each tradition gives an insight that maybe the other one doesn't quite have or isn't so clear. So that really, but in 1983, after the 40-day fast, that's kind of when I began going back to my roots and found just great treasures in the Torah. And the truth is, every week I'm still giving a teaching on it. It's just much deeper than most people look at it.
Taking a look at what you've done with your life and taking a look at America today, and we have people who watch from around the world, but here in the U.S., do you think that with all the stuff that's going on, the election, COVID, shutdown, open up, shut down, open up, stand up, sit down, fight, oh, that's a football thing.
That's right. Go ahead.
Are we spiritual, do you think, or as a country, or not?
So as we look into the nothing, and the principle is all life experiences can be seen as a way to wake up, I think what we're looking at is we're giving a very exciting way to wake up. We can talk about the fourth turning, we can talk about all this. The politics are not what it's about. What it's about, as I've been teaching my students, is reconnect with your soul. Then you can begin to understand a little bit what's going on, but your inner life is more important than your outer life. Without a solid inner life, you can't really deal with the outer life. What you get is confusion and fear and and misunderstanding and contraction. And so the first part of my book, I had TB when I was 1. That's 1943, and the truth is there was no cure. Obviously I'm alive, so and so but my mother elected to keep me at home. At least if I was going to die, I'll die at home. But I spent the next 33 years of my life looking for the mystery of death. Okay. And when I got, after I began meditated and received the spiritual awakening from Swami Muktananda, is, oh wait, the soul's immortal. Huh. The soul's immortal. Now, it's not an intellectual thing, it was an inner thing. And like, everything's okay. Because it doesn't really matter what happens. We're not going to be in fear. So one of the messages today is people think what's happening in the outer world is what's up. The truth is, when you connect to your soul and you understand your soul is immortal, there's nothing to fear and there's no contraction. Yes, you should take proper precautions. I'm not saying, ignore that. I have a whole paper on how to take proper precautions, like vitamin D and so forth. But I'm really saying something different. The fear goes away when you understand your soul's immortal. Then you're at peace. Because really in the Jewish tradition, the Christian tradition, the Buddhist tradition, the yogic, we have reincarnation. And the whole idea of why we're on the planet is to evolve spiritually. It's that straightforward. It's like, so there's no problem here. There's no fear. and then we can live our life in a good way. So that's what I'm teaching during this COVID time, is turn inside. The Essenes put it this way: the person that lives according to what happens outside of them lives as a slave. The person that lives according to what's happening inside lives as a free person. And so that's the teaching I'm giving to people. Pay attention. I mean, don't walk in front of a car, right? I'm not saying to do that. But see the bigger picture, that our soul's immortal, and that we are in an evolutionary process. And that's really one of the main teachings of Into the Nothing. Is like, it's okay, don't worry about things. You know, go ahead.
You've got so many different areas, okay? You know, Christianity, yoga, Judaism, Buddhism that you've mentioned. You've kind of blended them all together to come up with your thought of life?
Well, not exactly. It's a good question, including Native American. No, each one has a gift to give. And by honoring all the traditions, if you see, I'm able to pull the gifts from the different traditions to speak to the issue at hand. So they are separate, but at the top of the whole thing, when you go beyond the mind, because all these are about the mind, right? And I'm talking about a meditation where you go beyond the mind and literally dissolve into the nothing, okay? And that's like beyond all that. But the first step is to understand the personality is a case of mistaken identity. Just think about that for a second. We're not the body, we're not the mind, we're not our emotions. And once you understand that and stop identifying with the body as something you can lose, okay, then we start to expand. And Into Nothing is really about deep states of meditation where we disappear. So in the Torah tradition, it actually says you can't know God and live. It actually says that. That's the teaching.
Right.
Okay, but what I'm saying is that's true. And that I-ness ultimately, from my meditation experiences, dissolves into the nothing, and there is no separation from God. That's what Into Nothing is about, is that when we go further, we are not separate from God in any way. There's only God. A very famous Rabbi Nachman, 18th century, 1802, said, key is faith. But faith in what? Faith in the truth. What is the truth? There's only God.
I'm just
Very simple.
I'm remembering something from Sunday school, okay? Jewish Sunday school.
Yeah, I understand. I went to Jewish Sunday school too.
I think Aaron's sons went into the temple where they weren't supposed to be closer to God, and of course they died.
Right.
Right?
What happened is Aaron's son gave an inappropriate offering, and fire came out of the ark and burnt him up because he didn't acknowledge his elders. Moses, I mean, it's your uncle, okay? and his father, and they just acted. The two older sons acted kind of without really seeing the whole picture. So yes, spiritual life has to be really acknowledged, and they didn't. So part of this work is you have to evolve to a place where you can go into the nothing and still return. Okay?
Absolutely.
That's really what we're talking about.
You know, Forrest Gump said life is a box of chocolate, right?
Yeah.
Can you comment on that? Of course, it's sugar-free chocolate without any preservatives or any...
Healthy chocolate, cacao.
Yeah.
So what he's saying is the world, as it plays in our life, is a gift to us to evolve spiritually. So the chocolate is a gift for us to evolve spiritually. And so that's what we're talking about. Into the Nothing is like, this is a gift to grow, evolve spiritually. And if we see it that way, other people can see it as, oh, poor me, or I'm oppressed, or, you know, there's lots of scenarios. But my teaching is life is a box of chocolate. God is everywhere. And but the key is see it that way. See every challenge as a way to go spiritually. And that's kind of the key principle. So that was perfect what Forrest Gump said. I
Yeah,
love it.
it was great. Our guest is Dr. Gabriel Cousens. He's got a new book out. It's called Into the Nothing, a spiritual autobiography. Are there life lessons that in the book that anybody can learn? For example, you said you went through a 40-day fast. I have trouble not eating after an hour. It's a challenge.
So here's the point. There are people like me who are out in the frontiersmen. Then I come back and say, okay, here's insights. Now I can support you. You don't have to do a 40-day fast. I did that already. Okay. And there are lots of holes along the way. I may have fallen in all those holes, but as your spiritual teacher, I'm going to advise you, don't fall in that hole. You could walk around it. So people like me are kind of pioneers, spiritual pioneers. And then we come back and share that so people can have a framework so their walk can be easier and, in a sense, successful. I'm not complaining because my walk has been very successful, but I'm saying something different. So it takes the fear out of it. So mostly take sacred relations. I write a lot about that in the book because I'm a family therapist. Well, that's a jump into the unknown. You're going to look at all your stuff from family of origin. You're going to look at your ego stuff. You look at their ego stuff, their family of origin. Wow, that's not for safety or security.
Huh.
That's a spiritual path. Sacred relationships are a spiritual path. But it doesn't mean it's safe, secure, and everything's cool, because that's not the way it's designed. So everything is designed to help us awaken spiritually if we have the right attitude. It's like the right angle. That's the key teaching here.
How do we get that? I interview thousands of people. In fact, as we began our time together, Doctor, I remember interviewing you probably 30 years ago.
Yeah.
And so my thought is, how do we achieve the enlightenment that you have in your life?
So you can't achieve it. You can't attain what you've already attained. We are already it. Our job is waking up to it. Okay, so that's a rhetorical kind of statement, but there's grace involved. So we have two wings of the bird. You work hard, you meditate, like I did 6 hours a day. I'm still meditating twice a day and so forth. I'm doing yoga asanas. I do all these things. Okay, but without grace, it doesn't click. So there is grace that happens. And that's the key. How do you earn the grace? This intense faith, and then when it's your time, grace happens. But you have nothing to lose by eating a healthy diet. I teach 100% live vegan, 80% live food, doing yoga asanas, service and charity. I'm in 26 different nations doing diabetes prevention and organic farming. I work with a spiritual teacher, I meditate, and I give the Shakti Punch. So how do you get it? You keep doing all those things until grace happens. And grace does happen. So I have a meditation retreat once a month. 90% of the people get a spiritual awakening. It's just Friday night, Saturday, and Sunday. We start with Shabbat. So the point I'm making is you got to put in the effort, and then you draw the grace. So I'm going to use the word, you draw the grace by the way you live, by the intensity, spiritual intensity of the way you live.
Have you found that there are certain people who say, "Oh my, what you're teaching is wrong. My way is right." Whether it might be, an Orthodox Jew,
Yeah.
a Christian evangelist, and they can't accept what you're saying? Because you seem to me to be, as you said as we began, holistic,
Right.
encompassing everybody.
So I honor all paths, I honor all ways, and then I say, but there's a place that goes beyond the particular mindset into the nothing where there is no path and you're beyond the mind. All these paths are in the mind. And that's not a criticism. You got to start somewhere. Okay? And you got to work with the mind, you got to work the body, your mind becomes a superconductor with the diet, and then you're able to go beyond the mind. So I'm talking about beyond the mind, into the nothing. In the mind, we have all our rules and regulations. And they have a role. You need morals and ethics. Okay, that's really important. But then you build on it. Or you can choose to stop at moral and ethics and argue about which way is right. But beyond the mind, then you're not talking about which way is right because you're beyond the mind and your ideas are of right and wrong. But don't say, I'm not being nihilistic here.
Right.
You still are working with morals and ethics. You need that as your foundation. And whether it's the Torah have morals and ethics, the 10 speakings, 10 commandments, or Christian view or Buddhist Eightfold Path, it doesn't matter. They give you a framework, and then you stand on that. And so I don't really argue with people because you can't. There's not productive. What I do is support people in going a little further in their evolution.
You've mentioned the word faith several times, and
Right.
I'm going to make an assumption that Mrs. Singer, my English teacher back in high school, boy, I haven't thought of her for a long time, said, you can't assume, because that makes an ass out of you and me. But I'm making an assumption here. And the assumption is that everybody can achieve, and maybe that's the wrong word, enlightenment, and by believing. I mean, faith is it's 100%. I'm thinking of, there was a Star Trek episode where Mr. Spock mind melds with the crew so that they can get through. I think it was the shootout at the OK Corral, and that the bullets would go through them and not harm them. I don't know if you remember that episode. I think it was in 1969.
It was a long time ago. Go ahead.
Ago. And that's how, when I'm doing these interviews, my thoughts are coming from a spirit.
Right.
It's not necessarily Mark, but they're just these ideas coming through. And so I'm curious as to, blind faith. Because if you have blind faith in something that may be bad, and many people do, I'm not even, I don't even know.
There is in my book, because I discuss, these are really good questions. I do discuss it into the nothing. And the answer, as I give it, is back to the idea, what do you mean faith? Not blind, faith in the truth. What is the truth? There's only God. Okay, now that's one level. Okay. Another level is I say, look, you may have an inner message, but it has to fit with the morals and ethics of the last, 6,000 years. It has to fit with, what your spiritual teacher is telling you, if you have one, or your collective around you. So it has to fit with all these things before you jump off and follow it. So we don't have blind faith. I'm talking about faith. Faith is in the truth, and the truth is there's only God. But you have to have your feedback systems that keep you in alignment.
Sure.
It has to be truth. It has to be what your spiritual teachings are and the morals and ethics of the last 6,000 years. And then you're more likely to be in alignment. Because you can get very diluted, which is what you're talking about.
Right.
And this is a safeguard for that. And I talk about that because it's a very, very important issue that you raised.
Yeah, and I meet people all the time who say, my way is the only way.
Right.
Right? If you don't believe this way, you're going to go to hell. Well, I don't believe in hell. Still going to go there. Whatever they may say. And so I'm trying to to explore faith, because I think that humans question. I'll give you an example. I mean,
Yeah.
if you have, there's an old joke within the Jewish community. Okay, you have 10 people. You ask them, 10 Jewish people, a question. You get 20 answers, and they're all right.
That's right. That's right. But the key is they're all right because they're in alignment with a greater level of teachings. And there are different ways of understanding the same teachings. And I think that's the key to making it work. And if they're not really in alignment with the great teachings, then that's where it gets out of order. So I don't talk about blind faith. I really talk about faith in the truth. In other words, you've had an experience of the truth. Most people in their lives at some point have had an experience of the truth. People who haven't will argue they're right. Okay, but if you experience the truth, you understand it's a little bit bigger. It's that's why I'm more like a wild mystic. It's like, wait, I know this from a lot of different angles, and there's only God.
Right.
Okay, and my faith is in the truth that there's only God, not in my concept. Okay, because concepts are in the mind, and if you really haven't had an experience of the truth, you can't actually have faith. You can have blind faith, but you can't have faith. So I'm talking about a different level of faith. It's faith based on direct experience. Now, it doesn't mean you're spiritually enlightened, but you've had some taste of the truth. Okay, when I played football, which is how I got introduced to spirituality, I was having ecstatic experiences in the middle of a football game. How'd that happen? Well, whatever God was giving that to me, but I was going beyond my limits. When I go beyond my limits, I begin experiencing a different truth. Then I can talk about faith because I know that truth. I've already experienced it. And I know that there's only God. So there isn't your person's dissertation about God. There's only God. And that's kind of the key into nothing. It's like we go beyond the mind, and then we don't have those kind of discussions. Now, the other thing is there's 4 ways of understanding the Torah. Okay, there's Sasat, which is literal, which is kind of what we're talking about. You have deeper understanding, then you have metaphorical, and then you have the spiritual or mystical understanding. So there are people who only have one level of understanding, literal, as they interpret it. People then who are more metaphysical have deeper, and then again, allegorical, metaphysical, and then finally the direct knowing, what we call in Jewish way, akdut. You directly know the truth. Okay? And all those levels are existing at the same time. Now, into nothing, I really talk about the 4 levels as my total experience, and that's why it's holistic. I'm experiencing all 4 at once. That's the key concept.
We're running out of time, and I wanted to know, you're 77, and
my chronological body is 77, yes.
Okay.
But I regularly do 1,000 push-ups 3 times a week.
You do it. How long does that take?
Actually, I timed it the other day, about 4 minutes.
4 minutes to do, I don't even think I could do 10, which is really,
But it's when I was the captain of undefeated football team in college, I could do 70 push-ups. So think age 20 and think 57 years later, I'm doing 1,000. How did that happen? Because we can get younger with age if we put the effort in.
It's funny. There's a new book out called Growing Old Sucks, but it doesn't have to.
Yeah, that's good. I like that. That's good.
That's me on the cover. I wrote it.
I see. Okay, very good.
And it's all about what you just said. It's about experiencing different things, even at the age of 50, 60, 90. It doesn't matter. Everything from...
Correct.
And life is growing and learning. Would you agree with that? Life is about learning?
Absolutely. And we can get more flexible, stronger, and more endurance with age, also on the physical plane. And life is totally into nothing, totally about continuing to expand our consciousness, if we choose to see it that way. We can also see life as a contraction. I'm getting weaker. I can't really, don't have any. The world is as you see it, as you believe it to be. So my view is, I'm getting stronger and more flexible. I could not touch my toes when I was a 20-year-old football player, and now I put my palms on the ground. I couldn't cross my legs. Now I can sit in full lotus. How did that happen with age? Because if you put the energy in, you keep getting more flexible, stronger, and having more endurance. That's just what happens. You have to work harder. I'm not saying it's magical. Work harder, that's all.
And work is a word that many people don't like. They want instant rich, instant weight loss, instant wealth, instant flexibility. And I'm going to work on the flexibility. That's,
The fun is in the work. That's what draws the grace, because it allows you to transcend yourself. So into the nothing, again, I talk about how do we go beyond our limitations, beyond our mind that says work is hard. You see, no, work is work. You just go beyond it.
Right, right. This is fascinating. I got on Sundays, are you still watching football games?
No. When I finished the football season, I stopped.
You stopped. My son has gotten into football, and I've never gotten into football. I don't know why.
Well, I used to have season tickets to the Chicago Bear football games.
Oh, okay.
And I love it. I love it, but I'm done. I finished that phase of my life.
Got it.
Doesn't mean I don't work out. Doesn't mean I don't take care of myself, but I'm not playing football. I'm not doing that kind of warriorship. I completed that.
I really appreciate your time today, and invite you back anytime you want to come back. And
I'm happy. Just invite me back. Your questions are excellent. I really appreciate the insight and depth of your questions. And if people want to get into the nothing or reach me, we actually can be reached at infinitelightpublishing.com or drcousens.com or treeoflife.mn, mightynetworks.co.
What about Amazon is another one?
And well, Amazon, the book's available on Amazon.
Right. And they can reach you at those. We'll have a couple of websites. We've had them up during our conversation, so we'll have at least one of those up. Dr. Cousens, thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate it. Anytime you want to come back, just let me know. Shoot me an email, and you will.
Okay, we'll do that. I'm moving to Israel, and we'll see what happens. But Mark, it's great. May you be blessed to continue such good work in the world.
Thank you very much.
And may all the listeners be blessed that they're open to be inspired by what we just shared.
Thank you very much. Here, let me do one last thing. I'll do a little tag. This is Late Night Health, and I'm Mark. Let me do it again. I need you to be there. So this is Late Night Health. I'm Mark Alyn. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye for now. Good. Now I can stop the recording.